Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Russell Matthews here, back with a CRB extension update. You'll remember that this is the mini-series of videos that I'm bringing you anytime there's some new information that could make it more or less likely that the CRB is extended as we approach the end date of March 30th for all people who have been applying for the CRB since the beginning of the program. If you've been following the channel, you might remember the video where we talked about how the Canadian government is actively looking for help as they develop their upcoming budget. They asked businesses and financial institutions and advocacy groups, as well as Canadian individuals directly, what they think the Canadian government should be spending money on in the future. And the reason I'm bringing that up today is because the government just received 2 new reports that they could be using to help them make this decision. Now, one of these reports advocates for continued spending and potential future stimulus and benefits for people. The other one is sort of leaning towards the side of saying, hey, we should ease up on the spending. Today, we're going to take a closer look at these reports and see whether or not the government could be using these to make this decision. But before we do, if you haven't already done so, make sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell to support more Canadian content like this being developed right here on YouTube. The first report we're going to take a look at is this one here. It's the International Monetary Fund, and it's praising Canada's COVID-19 economic response plan. And the reason we're going to take a look at it first is because I think this might have some more influence over the decisions that our politicians are going to make. Now, the reason I think this is because Justin Trudeau retweeted this tweet by Chrystia Freeland, who is the finance minister for Canada. Now, they're actively pushing this report out, so it could be a sort of indicator that they're looking more closely at this than the other report we're going to talk about today. And we can also read in a little bit to the language they use here. Chrystia Freeland says, "I welcome the IMF's annual report, which recognizes Canada's meaningful and decisive actions to fight COVID-19. Canada is focused on supporting people and the economy through this crisis. We will continue to do whatever it takes for as long as it takes." You'll remember this is sort of the catchphrase for her and Justin Trudeau, saying we are going to continue to support people going forward. Now, they haven't announced anything yet, but this is the language that they're using. The people who wrote this report are part of the International Monetary Fund. Now, this is a global organization that works together with about 190 different countries in order to promote prosperity in all of those countries. The report goes into a ton of different details about Canada's response to the pandemic and their financial policies that they put in, like with these benefits and with the business supports. So I gave this report a read, and I found these small little bits that I think are most important to you, so you don't have to spend an hour reading this thing. Throughout a lot of this report, they're really praising the Canadian government's response here, saying that the authorities took timely, decisive, and well-coordinated policy actions in response to the pandemic. And they praise the fact that we've spent almost 15% of our gross domestic product on things like healthcare, support for households, firms, and vulnerable groups through cash transfers and wage subsidies. Specifically, households is what's significant here because that's referring to the CERB and the CRB and all of those related benefits. They also speak quite positively about the way the Bank of Canada responded to this pandemic situation and the way they lowered interest rates through something called their quantitative easing program. Now, it's up for debate on whether or not this was a successful program because in my eyes, it's really stretched the gap between the wealthy and the not wealthy here in Canada by boosting up things like real estate and stocks. So you might be saying, okay, Russell, why does this report even matter? It's not like they're the ones making the decisions on whether or not the CRB is going to be extended. Well, you're correct, but it's also important to note that the people who have written this report have sent the report to the Canadian government to take a look at, and those people who are reading it within the Canadian government, like Chrystia Freeland, Justin Trudeau, they're the ones who make the decision. So the fact that they're so congratulatory and praising of Canada's spending could lean towards the side of these benefits being extended for the foreseeable future. In the report, they also talk specifically about CERB here, saying that the significant job losses at the onset of the crisis put pressure on the employment insurance system, and many Canadians did not qualify for this income support, so it prompted the rapid rollout of CERB to help fill the gaps. And by the time the CERB expired, 8.9 million people had applied for the benefit, and they expanded the EI system and created the new Canada Recovery Benefit. So they continue to praise these programs. If I were Justin Trudeau or if I were Chrystia Freeland and I was reading this report, I'd get the feeling like I had done my job well and I should continue doing the types of things that I have been doing. Now, if they get that impression from this report, then it could be more likely that these benefits are extended until we can get the economy back rolling once the vaccines are out and we return to some sort of new normal. But there was another report just released that sort of looks at this through a different lens. And among the authors for this report is Paul Manley. Now, if that name doesn't sound familiar to you, that's okay. He was the former finance minister for the Liberal government back in the era of Paul Martin and Jean Chrétien. Given that he was a former Liberal leader and a former Liberal finance minister, it could be that the current Liberal leadership would listen to this report more heavily. And he actually just completed an interview with BNN Bloomberg, and in it he has some comments about the CERB and the CRB and how he thinks that should move forward. Let's go take a look at it.
One of the concerns we've heard expressed is that spending that is related to this emergency, this pandemic, should be temporary. And it shouldn't morph into permanent spending. But you know better than anyone, I think, that programs like the CERB can kind of just evolve into semi-permanent, and then next thing you know, it's considered a benefit and a whole bunch of people are receiving it. How do you make sure that there's a clean cutoff and that spending doesn't become permanent that was needed for this pandemic?
Talking about the end of benefits
you need a very tough finance minister, I can tell you that. I think my gut instinct is that we have one, but Minister Freeland's going to have to be very clear about what the expectations are and how this is going to unwind. CERB is a good case in point because it has tided people through a time when, unlike the usual employment insurance programs, everything just shut down and has stayed shut down more or less for 11 months now. So there's no doubt that a special program was needed. But we've got to get back to normal programs, employment insurance based on attachment to the workforce for a scaled set of benefits that preserves the incentive to resume real work in the employment force of the country.
All right, interesting. So it seems like his take on all of this is like, yes, we should have brought in these special programs, the CERB, the CRB, because EI simply wasn't going to cut it. But he's saying that going forward, the Liberal government should think more about scaling back these programs and maybe improving EI a little bit, but making sure that it's scalable and it's tied to your time in the workforce. He also says, based on his experience and his gut, however much you want to trust that, he thinks that Chrystia Freeland is a tough finance minister and will be able to push back against Justin Trudeau if he attempts to make any of these programs permanent. In the actual report that he was a part of creating, they talk about what they think the money should be spent on going forward. And they say present circumstances suggest that any stimulus should be geared to boosting the economy's productive capacity, raising labor force participation, raising immigration, strengthening the foundation of the business sector, and raising business investment. A number of options were raised, including channeling support for workforce training directly to businesses and support workers taking on work through an enhanced Canada Workers Benefit. Also, the federal government could support families through an expanded Canada Child Benefit. Wow, I can't talk today. So they're talking a lot about trying to get Canada back to work and increasing the productive capacity. Now, he mentions also in this interview, we didn't watch this portion of it, but he's talking about how funding should be going towards rapid testing so we can open up more portions of the economy. Instead of having to expand these benefits longer, people can just get back to work. And the kinds of benefits that this report tends to support are things like the Canada Workers Benefit and the Canada Child Benefit, both things that can help the economic output of the country because it allows more people to get to work. So if the current Canadian government were to really take this report to heart, it could be less likely now that benefits could be extended and that additional stimulus or new programs could be created moving forward. But as of right now, we don't know what the government's decision is going to be and what the economic roadmap forward is going to look like here in the country, because we still don't have a budget from the federal government. Once that budget's released, we'll have a better idea of knowing. But as of right now, we don't know when exactly that budget is coming, because right now they're in this period where they're trying to gather all the information and resources. But I'm curious about what you think. What do you think of each of these reports? Do you think that the Liberals are more likely to look at the first one or the second one? Let me know down in the comments. And if you want to chat directly along with other people in the community, we have a Discord server. Again, that link is in the description and you can take a look at it there. And of course, if you haven't already done so, make sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell to support Canadian YouTube channels just like this one. And also, if you can think of anybody who might be interested in this topic and wants to find out more about this whole situation, feel free to click the share button and send them a link to this video as well. All right, with all of that said, thank you so much for watching, everybody. I hope this video helped you out at least a little bit, and I'll see you next time.